question of Taiwan is absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciate you sort of giving us a glimpse at the historic background as well as the current sort of dynamic between Taiwan and China. I think this is absolutely fascinating, and I would love to discuss this in a separate episode. I think our viewers
Sure.
would really appreciate that and benefit from this information. So it certainly deserves its own episode or two or
Yeah.
three probably. But maybe for purposes of today's video, the last question that I would love to get your thoughts on
Mhm.
is has to do with the upcoming visit of Donald Trump to China. So we know that he was very upset when Carney went, and he sort of made this big deal and said Carney is a governor, and the usual sort of spiel. And then PM Starmer went, and Trump wasn't pleased as well for obvious reasons that we just discussed. Now, he himself is going to Beijing very soon, as far as I understand, within the next several months. And what would you say are Beijing's main goals for this visit? And what's Trump truly after?
I think Beijing's objectives are actually stabilization of the relationships, right, to what they would probably call normalize the dynamics between Washington and Beijing, to have channels of communications that are functional and dependable, that have economic relationships that are actually, predictable and not subject to capricious whim. They're the sorts of outcomes that I think um, Beijing will be seeking to accomplish. At the same time, they're not going to get pushed around. And I don't think that President Trump going to Beijing is in a position to push China around. We saw that last year. But what's interesting is that President Trump will be in Beijing. I doubt that he would go to Beijing and then try to, push China around whilst he's visiting Beijing, number one. The other thing to remember is that this is one of probably four encounters that the leaders of the two countries will have this year, which is, quite unusual. And there are opportunities, I think. So if we looked at this from a glass half full perspective, there are opportunities for some important recalibrations and stabilizations, whether it's at the level of people-to-people exchanges, whether it's at the level of research and development collaborations at a university level. Of course, there are things that the United States has specific concerns about, such as the question of narcotics and fentanyl. And I think we have started to see some important results on that, to a point where the number of overdose deaths in the United States has dropped substantially, and that's, I think, a clear sign that when Washington and Beijing can actually focus and work together, that important outcomes can be achieved, that the leaders of different countries actually want to see happen. We're going to, I think, see. Look, I would like to think that we will see some stabilization and consolidation of the economic relationships. The challenge that Beijing always has with Washington, particularly these days, is this issue of dependability, right? Does what the presidents say on one day carry through to the next? We have, I think, over the last 12 months, a track record of, what is said one day is often changed the next. And I don't just mean in relation to China, but we see that in lots of other things as well. We touched on that earlier. One day it's okay for Canada to do a deal with Beijing, and the next day it's not. So I think one of the concerns that Beijing has in relation to Washington today is that Washington itself does not have institutional clarity. Put aside President Trump's own, um, uh, predilections and his own style. Put all of that aside. Washington itself institutionally does not seem to have a clarity of purpose. It has emotional purpose. We want to be number one. We've got to stop others from being number one. But it doesn't actually have institutionalized public policy purpose. There is no clarity about how it wants to relate to the institutions of the world. The idea of its trading relationships with the world is governed by, simplistic slogans around deficits and tariffs. That's not a way of ultimately having a long-term economic strategy that satisfies Washington's ambitions, whilst at the same time enabling it to function properly as part of a global ecosystem. So these are the challenges that I think Beijing has. I mean, what does Trump want? Look, I think President Trump largely wants to um, uh, uh, have what are in effect public media wins, announceables, things that can be, put on a plaque and put on a wall, acknowledgements of President Trump being an historic figure. Um, and so, looking for photo opportunities and announceables. That's really the sort of things that I think this particular president tends to prioritize. Um, and I don't think that that's actually that hard to accommodate. Um, you know, from Beijing's point of view, more than happy to let President Trump get whatever limelight he's trying to accomplish out of something, provided that the broader objectives around stability and predictability are achieved. And we saw a bit of that out of the meeting last year, right, at Busan in
Mhm.
Korea, when the leaderships got together and at least brought some method to their interactions, right? And a lot of it is about having some method, having the channels, the phones that get answered. When people use certain words, they mean certain things. So and I think we can hopefully see that sort of thing consolidate going forward. And if from the world's point of view, if we can see that happen this year with the various interactions between President Xi and President Trump, then the world at large can uh, uh, maybe breathe a small sign of relief that there is at least a level of détente and civilized engagement that won't cascade into sort of open conflict.
Warwick, thank you so much for joining us. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to having you on the program again soon.
Great to be with you.